Dan Mitre joins me now, New Wave Esports CEO for the New Wave Esports update. Dan, welcome back.
Hey James, how you doing? It's good to see you again. I see you're there in Toronto. I'm coming from, well, it's been a rainy Los Angeles, but it's still much better weather. I can't complain.
Well, the same here in Toronto, unfortunately. So Dan, tell me, what's new in the world of New Wave Esports or esports generally?
Yeah, so we've made some pretty big moves. As of Monday of last week, we announced a definitive agreement to fully acquire Even Matchup Gaming. And we're very, very excited to fold Even Matchup underneath the New Wave portfolio and add them to the family of companies that we work with.
Yeah, I saw that.
Yeah, pretty badass.
Yeah, excellent. What's the story with Event Matchup? What do they do?
So, Even Matchup Gaming was founded in 2014 by gentleman Joe Krabari. He goes by Toronto Joe. And he's got this incredible community behind him that very much leans into him to experience esports within the fighting game community, or FGC, what we call for short. So they are a Toronto-based leading esports organization that's producing high-quality events and content with top-level athletes. We're talking some of the biggest fighting game athletes are coming out to our events and competing, and that brings a whole bunch of different enthusiasts along, whether they're fans of those athletes or just want to see Super Smash Brothers played at a high caliber. So Even Matchup, they are Canada's leader in FGC events. They run 80 events a year with two majors, one called Get On My Level, which is produced every May in Toronto. And then they have a growing presence in the U.S. as they come down to the tri-state area and produce Let's Make Moves, which is just second to Get On My Level. So they're doing incredible, awesome events, and if you've never been to an esports event, I go to a GOML, go to a Let's Make Moves. You'll see some incredible experiences.
Very cool. And so it's in May in the Toronto area.
Yeah. So last year we hosted it at the Exhibition Place. This year we're going to be at the Maple Leaf Gardens. So big turnout.
Wow, that sounds exciting. And so, relative to other esports categories, how big is FGC?
So FGC is I would say a very small niche sliver within the grander esports ecosystem. You know, you've got like the Call of Duties, the Fortnites, the League of Legends, which pull in millions upon hundreds of millions of views and hundreds of millions of esports enthusiasts that are following along. But within the ecosystem, yes, fits FGC, is these fighting games. But with this very niche audience is a very hyper-engaged audience. So, you know, last year we were expecting 1,000 people to come out to our event. We saw 2,100 people come out. We saw just under 1 million live stream views on the Get On My Level live stream itself. That means people very much follow along fighting games. Number one, because they're easy to understand. There's two people, and they duke it out. There's really nothing else going on, and it's an easy format to follow. And a lot of times it's that single elimination. Okay, that guy lost, so now he doesn't go on. He goes to the loser's bracket. So it's much easier to digest that content and be entertained by it. And so that's where we see a very hyper-engaged audience coming out to our events, watching our live streams, which in turn makes sponsors happy because they want to get in front of those eyeballs.
You bet. So is it safe to say that the Even Matchup Gaming acquisition is sort of a case study of how New Wave Esports is going to build shareholder value over time through the expansion of your portfolio through acquisition?
I think that's a great summary. Yeah. So, you know, up to this point, our portfolio has mainly been comprised of minority investment or minority stake investments, more of the traditional holdings co. And that served as a great foundation to bring our portfolio live to the CSE. So now as we go forward, you'll see over the next 6 to 12 months, a hard right turn to full acquisitions. And that's where it's important for us to, number one, build these companies. We are passionate about esports, and we want to see esports thrive. So now we have the capital and the money to acquire these companies, bring in the operation expenses, optimize those, and multiply their revenues year over year. So a company like Even Matchup Gaming and all the other companies going forward are very integral to the health of our portfolio, but also the industry. Specifically with Even Matchup, they are scalable and they're rapidly growing. So that tells me, a minimal investment in operation expenses in order to grow more into a North American audience and then expand live stream to a global audience. So each one of their events has been setting record level attendance. They attract hyper engaged audiences that sponsors want to get in front of. And honestly, this acquisition really represents a major milestone in our commitment to fully acquire esports companies and products. And it demonstrates our expertise in identifying acquisition opportunities at fair market value. So there's a lot of different perks to why we made this decision and why we'll make those decisions to acquire very specific companies going forward.
Sure. So using the fighting game community as an example, you mentioned that it's a very niche sort of component to the whole esports universe, yet nonetheless, you've got millions of people visiting and 80 tournaments each year. So is this like a niche that could explode into like a mainstream thing, or is it more like it's a niche, but in the esports world, niche still means millions of eyeballs?
Both, right? So niche still does mean millions of eyeballs. Look at Evo. Evo's is, in my consideration, I think is undoubtedly the biggest fighting game tournament in the world, and that attracts thousands of people coming out, and again millions of views on live stream. So people still want to watch esports. And no matter what their passion is, they're going to go seek it and they're going to find it. And so, yes, even though this is niche, still the gaming audience is a 2.5 billion gamer worldwide affair, and within that sits esports, and then within that sits fighting game communities. So this is something that's rapidly growing. We see an audience base within just even matchup of about 7,400 engaged audience members who come out to our events year over year, and that's continuing to grow. And so as we go into 2020, we're working closely with Even Matchup to show what that projected revenue looks like, what is the product timeline, where are we going to expand further, and then obviously make that publicly available, but also really start driving events and getting people charged up. How do we connect with their communities at a local level that gives them the inspiration to either compete or come out to additional events in the future, and really build a experience, build a community behind us. So what Joe has done to this date since 2014 is the fruits of his labor is actually coming to fruition. And there's people coming out that want to engage and watch Super Smash Brothers. They want to watch Street Fighter V and Tekken 7 played at the most highest caliber available out there. And you have incredible sponsors that are coming in that want to be latched to that high quality production and get in front of these eyes. So as you see in 2020, we're going to start really kind of getting underneath the hood and pulling back the veil where we can, and publicly disclosing, hey, here's the explosive growth. Here's where we're monetizing. And here's where the community is walking away with incredible experiences.
Wow, sounds fascinating. Where do you see the biggest sort of market opportunity in new wave or in esports generally in 2020?
Well, what we're seeing here, and it's kind of highly reflective, what I'll first start is where we don't necessarily want to go. You had, Mark Cuban that recently just stated that if you invest in teams, it's going to be a hard investment. And the reason, and I tend to agree with that because, yeah, they're pulling some great top line revenues, but profitability is pretty low, anywhere from 1% to 4% profit margins, because a lot of the expenses go to team salaries, running training houses, to all this, your standard overhead. And it's hard for teams to stay afloat and continue being green businesses, where yes, we still invest in those because we invest in the ecosystem. It's important to have athletes and actual teams competing at high calibers, but we're seeing much more profitability in the tournament operator side. So this coming out of the gate is our first acquisition, is our commitment to that. And what you're going to see as we publicly disclose our financials over the next several quarters is obviously, hopefully, a growth in the event operator side, and those revenues starting to multiply and the profitability starting to increase. We see it now, and so with us as our expertise of coming in optimize these businesses and tapping into our network, we're certainly going to help that growth.
You bet. All right, Daniel, we're going to leave it there for now. We'll come back to you soon. Thanks very much for the update. That was the New Wave Esports update.